right, so here we go. We have so much to get to tonight. We have an incredible class. I'm turn off my ringer, but we're not disturbed. Hey, Mom, good to see you. Okay, here we go. Let's jump in. Torah portion this week is Pinchas. Now, let's jump in for a second on the name. Pinchas is the name of the hero of the story that we ended last week's Torah portion with. So last week's Torah portion was Balak. Balak was the king of Moab who hired this guy Balaam to try to curse the Jewish people. It doesn't work. This was last week, right? It doesn't work, turns into blessings. But at the end, before he leaves, Balaam the prophet says to Balak the king, I have a point of advice. Get the Jewish people to sin with immorality and idolatry, and God is not going to be happy. And so it goes. And as we discussed last week, the leader, the chief of the tribe of Shimon, himself is, for lack of a better term, acting immorally with one of these Midianite idolatresses, and Pinchas, and a plague is breaking out. It's like just absolute havoc and devastation. I feel like I was just thinking, like the 10 Commandments were made into a movie. Sorry, the movie 10 Commandments depicts the Exodus and Sinai. I'm thinking I feel like there's more material in the Torah that could be turned into a dramatic film. But either way, the point is that this plague is breaking out. Pinchas steps up. No one's doing anything. Steps up, takes a spear, and he pierces through the Jewish prince and the Midianite princess, and the plague stops. And the bloodshed, that was an act of zealotry that ends the plague. And thus, it segues right into this week's Torah portion. And God says, because Pinchas ended the plague, ended the devastation, ended the chaos, so therefore I am making him an honorary Kohen. And indeed, he becomes a Kohen, him and his descendants from then on. Okay. The Torah portion continues with other themes, and amongst the themes of the parsha this week, the Torah portion of Pinchas, moving away from that dramatic story, it talks about Chalukat Haaretz, which means the division of the land, how the land of Israel was divided. And recall, I mentioned this last week, but recall that at this point, the Jewish people find themselves at the end of the 40 years of their journeys, the end of the 40 years of wandering, and they are just about set to enter into the promised land. That will happen soon. Within a few months, they will be entering the land of Israel. In between then, a lot's going to happen. Moses is going to have a very long final talk with the Jewish people, with his people, for 37 days. That is the entirety of the book of Deuteronomy. The fifth book of Torah, in case you wondered what that's all about, is the last 37 days of the life of Moses. And so that's coming up in a few weeks. We're going to have the final month and a week of Moses' life at the end of the 40 years. But here, right before that point in time, so again, we're at the end of the 40 years, the Torah tells us about the division of the land. Now, they were not yet in Israel, but Moses, as the leader, was going to facilitate how the land was divvied up. Now, there are 12 tribes. And so Israel was divided into, again, they weren't in the land yet, but this is, the advanced division, not the mathematical kind, but the advanced division of the land was done. Israel was divided into 12 states. 12 portions of land, and allocated to each of the 12 tribes. Now, how did they do it? So the Torah tells us, fascinatingly enough, the Torah says that it was divided by a gorel. A gorel. What's a gorel? Gorel is a lottery. It was done by lottery. How did the lottery take place? Again, the commentaries based on the biblical cues tell us the following: that basically the land was divided. They apportioned it into 12 distinct states, 12 portions of land. They wrote down each of those names of the 12 pieces of land on, I don't know if they had paper, like we have paper, but they wrote it down on something. They inscribed it on some sort of paper or whatever. And then they put those 12 pieces of paper into one box or basket, and then they put the names of the 12 tribes in the other. And so what happened was they drew the lots. They drew one from one basket and one from the other basket. So they drew out the name of the piece of land, and they drew out the name of the tribe. Oh, we have a match, right? And so this is the way that the lottery was done. Take a look at text 1a. All right, let's just look at this inside. You'll see what I mean. This is how the Torah describes it. Hold on, let me just double check. Can you guys see that? Yeah. Okay, great. Dividing the land, the talking lot. You'll see what that means in a second. Text 1a says the Torah, this is the verse itself. The inheritance of the land should be apportioned to the tribe, whether numerous or few, by pronouncement of the lottery. This is as God describes the process to Moses. He says, how is the land, who's going to get what piece of land, right? The tribe of Reuben, the first tribe, or the oldest tribe, right? The firstborn, the tribe of Reuben. Which piece of land do they get? Who decides? The answer is, it is by the pronouncement of the lottery. So fair, it's fair and square. It's up to lottery. It's up to, divine, we would say chance, but it's really up to divine allocation as through the lottery. However, we find something fascinating that if you look at the Hebrew, and we're going to just analyze the Hebrew for a second, the Torah uses the words al pi hagoral. You see that al pi hagoral. Now that means literally by the mouth. Pi means the mouth. Al pi hagoral literally means by the mouth of the lottery, the land shall be divided. So that prompts the sages to say in the Talmud and the Midrash and Rashi to comment in text 1b the following. Take a look, al pi hagoral, by pronouncement or by the mouth of the lottery. Says Rashi, again, he didn't come up with this. This is from ancient sources. Say our sages, the lot spoke. The lot spoke. What we have here is a classic case of a miracle. What we have here is a classic case of a wild miracle in which the lottery actually spoke. The piece of paper or the piece of parchment, the piece of whatever it was, actually said, this tribe and that land is a shidduch, is a match, and that this land belongs to this tribe. Wild. A crazy miracle or crazy situation of a talking lottery. Now, we need to dig into this a little bit more because this itself is puzzling. Why would, let's ask a basic question. The basic question is, why would the lottery need to talk? What's the value of a talking lottery? It seems a little bit bananas. Now, I think that if we thought about this a little bit longer, we might come to the conclusion and say, look, I know why a talking lottery is a good thing. A talking lottery is good because that way there's no ambiguity. It's like, imagine if you were playing, I don't know, Monopoly, and you roll the dice. I think you roll dice in Monopoly, right? It's been a minute. And imagine if instead of 4, imagine if the die or dice themselves or itself would pronounce, you've landed on 4, or I am on 4, I am 5. All right, that would be a clearer sign. It would be a miraculous declaration of the allocation of, in this case, the allocation of the land, in which case no one could contest it. It's not like Reuven come back to Moses and complain and say, hey, I don't like my land. It's too small. It's too this, it's too that, it's too the other. No complaints. You got what you got by divine lottery, by miraculous pronouncement. That's it. You got it. By the way, I will say, it's not only to prevent kvetching, but if you think about it, it's also about what's the right way to say this? It's about kind of certainty for the person. Imagine if you knew that exactly where you were is where you're supposed to be. That would be kind of cool, right? You would feel pretty confident in that situation instead of second guessing. Oh, maybe I should have done that. Maybe I should have made a different choice. Maybe I shouldn't be where I am. Imagine if you were told, no, you belong in Alabama. I'm kidding. You belong in Atlanta. You belong in, right, wherever Stone Mountain, Pittsburgh, wherever you are, imagine if the divine lottery spoke and made a declaration. It'd be like, oh, wow, totally validated. Not only am I not going to complain, I'm actually going to feel good about where I am. So the lottery talked. Great. Problem is, seems to be unnecessary. Why is it unnecessary? It's unnecessary for the following reason. And by the way, because we're all on Zoom tonight, right? We're all on Zoom together. So let's do readings on Zoom. Mark, would you like to do a reading for us? All right, good. I'm reading lips, so I know that you said absolutely. Sure. Especially because my talking lottery asked me that you should read. So now you can't argue because it was declared by the lottery. So there you go. 1 second. Let me share it on Zoom. This is text number 2. Talmud Bava Batra 122a says the following. Take it away.
Okay. The land was divided by lottery, as the verse states, only by lottery. The land was divided by a prophetic spirit, communicated through the Urim, the Tumim, engraved letters of the high priest's breastplate. As the verse states, by pronouncement of the lottery. How can both be true? Eleazar, the high priest, donned his breastplate, through which God communicated. Joshua and all the Jews stood before him. A lottery receptacle with the names of the tribes stood before him, and a lottery receptacle with the names of the land portions stood before him. He ascertained by divine spirit and proclaimed, the tribe of Zebulun will arise from the lottery, and the portion of Akko will arise with him. He drew from the receptacle of the tribes, and Zebulun emerged in his hand. He drew from the receptacle of land portions, and the portion of Akko emerged in his hand. He ascertained once more by divine spirit and proclaimed, the tribe of Naphtali will arise from the lottery, and the portion of Genesar will arise with him. He drew from the receptacle of the tribes, and Naphtali emerged in his hand. He drew from the receptacle of land portions, and the portion of Genesar emerged in his hand.
Well, there you go. That's how it worked. So it turns out, according to the Talmud, there was another miracle that happened. And the miracle was that the high priest, Elazar, who was doing the drawing, he called it before it was actually drawn from the lottery. He said, the example that he gives is Zavulun, Zebulun, and Akko. Yeah, they're going to come up. And lo and behold, they came up. By the way, I've seen this special. I believe it was a David Copperfield or David Blaine. But either way, like, it's amazing, right? He calls it. He says, I am about to pick Zavulun, Akko, boom, boom, match. So look, if you already had the prophecy, let's just call it prophecy, of the high priest wearing the Urim V'Tumim, just to explain, was the breastplate. The high priest wore the breastplate. It was like a gold plate that he wore over his chest. It had 12 stones, 12 precious stones for each of the 12 tribes. And in each of the stones was engraved one of the names of the tribes of Israel. And it says that when there was a very difficult question, so they would ask the high priest, who would ask God, and then the stones lit up to provide the answer. Remember, even today, right? Remember touch tone telephones? Not the rotary. The rotary is fun, though. Rotary is epic, right? But remember, like, after rotary, there were the touch tones. And if you had to dial, like, I don't know, Comcast, I don't know why you would want to, but let's just say you had to, right, dial Comcast. So you were like 1-800 Comcast. You're like, okay, see, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? You dial the letters on the thing. So every tribe, right, was written on the stones, and the tribes had letters, and part of that experience was the letters lit up. It's like, what was that game that it lit up and it was a pattern? It's like the colors.
Princess phones did that.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about a game that lit up that was whatever. Doesn't matter. Anyway, the point is that it lit up, and then the Kohen Gadol had to figure out which letters was the intention of the divine, and that was also part of the prophecy. But the point of all this, really the point of this entire piece of Talmud, and the reason why I bring it in context, is to say that there was a measure of divine prophecy. God communicated through the Kohen Gadol, through the high priest. By the way, just to clarify, Aaron, Moses' brother, was the first high priest. But at this point, he had passed away. He had already died. That's why his son Eleazar took over. He was the next high priest. And that's the one who facilitated this drawing of the lottery. But the lottery was predicted through prophecy. So you had the prophecy, then you had the drawing of the lottery, and then the lottery spoke. Did you need it to speak also? What does it do? Also dance and juggle on a unicycle? Like, what does it need to do already? We got the point. It's by divine orchestration. No one's complaining. Everyone's happy. Everyone's satisfied. What do you need a talking lottery for? That's the core question that we're asking today. Because we also have this teaching. Susan K., if you don't mind, please read this very next text that I'm going to put up here on the screen, text number 3. This is a classic Jewish teaching about miracles.
God desires to preserve the natural order as much as possible. The order of nature is precious to him. He overrules it only in cases of critical necessity.
Thank you. Rabbi Nissim of Gerona says the following point, which we just read, that God created nature for a reason. God didn't create nature only to uproot it every moment. God created the rules of nature, only overrides it when necessary. Who was the one that said, these are my principles, if you don't like it, I have others? Someone said that, right? But God says, these are my rules of nature, and by and large, I'm going to stick to it, unless there are extenuating circumstances, which means that miracles are the exception, not the rule. In this case, we can ask the question, why did God need to perform yet another miracle regarding the allocation of the land, i.e. a talking lottery? It seems a bit much. As the kids would say in 2024, or maybe 2021, I don't know if I'm like that up to date, right? They would say it seems a little extra, right? This seems like a little bit like we don't need it. God communicates to the high priest. The letters are lighting up, predicting it. He calls it. He then draws it. It all lines up. Good. Then the lottery speaks. I mean, come on. What? That's extra, unnecessary. What is the point? That's the core question of today's class. Make sense? Yeah.
And it's above nature. Besides being besides being overkill, it's also not natural.
It's not natural. It's completely supernatural. A talking lottery makes no sense. You talk about prophecy. That's also, you would call that also not ordinary, but at least that's something that's happened more than once. But a talking lottery, what is this? By the way, it's interesting because what was it, last week? Yeah, last week. Torah portion of Balak. So Balaam, the evil prophet, on his way to try to curse the Jewish people, he gets on a donkey, and the donkey causes, right? And the donkey begins to speak. And that's a whole thing. So, I mean, I always think of that as Shrek, but like, be that as it may, the talking donkey in Shrek, right? That was
done on purpose.
No, I know, but I'm saying that was who was that actor? Who was the actor of the Shrek?
Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy, thank you. I was picturing him in my head, and I'm like, I cannot get the words out. I can't. Yes, Eddie Murphy, fantastic in that. Anyway, what's the point? The point is that in the last 2 weeks, things are talking out of nowhere. You have donkeys that are talking. You have lotteries that are talking. We're not going to address last week. Last week was last week. We didn't focus on that last week. But today, why the talking lottery? Okay, so to address this, I'll tell a story. The story goes, once upon a time, it was the winter of 1970. And in Brooklyn, New York, a large crowd had gathered. Why? Because it was the 20th anniversary of the passing of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, who passed away in January of 1950. So this was January of 1970. So it was the 20th year since the previous Rebbe's passing, and the 20th anniversary of the Rebbe, our Rebbe, becoming Rebbe. So 20 years was a milestone. And so a lot of guests had gathered from around the world, including Israel. And everyone spent the weekend, Shabbat, and it was a whole Farbrengen, and it was a party and crown nights. Well, it came time for all the guests to leave and go back home. The Rebbe called a Farbrengen, which is a gathering in the main synagogue, 770 Eastern Parkway, conveniently located on the 2 and 3 subway lines. But anyway, so the Rebbe gathers really right outside. The Rebbe gathers a Farbrengen, and it's dedicated to the guests from Israel. So everyone's invited, but it was specifically dedicated to those that had come in before they leave to have a farewell address, saying L'chaim a little bit, and then everyone goes in their flights. Well, the Farbrengen went, and it didn't end super fast. And at a certain point, I don't know which day of the week this was, but at a certain point of the festivities, people are starting to, shift in their seat, become a little uneasy. They're checking their watches. I mean, 1970, I'm sure they're checking their pocket watch. I'm kidding, right? They're checking their watches. They're looking at the clock, and people are getting uneasy. Why? Because everyone's got to get to JFK to catch the flight back to Israel, back to Tel Aviv. All right. Rebbe notices this and stops in the middle of what he was saying, and he said, I'll tell you a story. Oh, you know what we're doing right now? A story in a story. Yes, we've hit the Holy Grail. Okay, so he says, let me tell you a story. The story happened in 40 or 50 years prior to 1970. So this was the 1920s. Location, Russia. Soviet Russia. The Rebbe says, my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, my father-in-law was about to embark on a mission for the sake of Soviet Jewry. And he had a big meeting, a very important meeting in Moscow. He was in Leningrad and he was traveling to Moscow for this meeting. He was going to take a train. And this was one of these meetings and missions that were critical to, existentially critical to Jewish life, physically and spiritually in Russia, 1920s. And the Rebbe says, in 1970, he tells a story that in the 1920s, he says, I walk into my father-in-law's office, and there he is, 15 minutes before he has to catch a train, to go on this mission. And he's sitting there. He's writing something or reading something as if there's nothing else on the calendar. He's just calmly dealing with paperwork, as it were. And the Rebbe said, I couldn't hold myself back as his son-in-law. And I said, how are you focused? How are you so focused when you have this epic mission in front of you? And the previous Rebbe, his father-in-law, told him the following. He said, hundreds of years ago, there was a man named Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet. Yeah. You know what we're doing right now. A story in a story in a story. Yeah. I said that we had hit the Holy Grail. This is the Holy Grail. A story in a story in a story. So he says, hundreds of years ago, several hundred years ago, there was a man, a great rabbi, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet. He's known as the Rashba. Rashba, if you spell it in Hebrew, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, put it together, the acronym, Rashba. Rashba was one of the great Rishonim, the early Talmudic commentaries. So he would have lived in the medieval times, I don't know, 1100s, 1200s, a genius, a Talmudic scholar par excellence. So the previous Rebbe says to his son-in-law, our Rebbe, 1920s, in Leningrad, 15, probably now 12 minutes away from the train, he says, look, the Rashba, he gave 3 lectures a day. He was a physician. He studied extensively, and he was a leader of the Jewish community. And yet, every day, he took a walk. Every day, he took a walk for health. And when he took a walk, in other words, he had time to take a stroll. Text number 4. Dr. Maxey, if you can please read this one, I'd be very grateful. Let me pull it up. Text 4.
The natural explanation is that when Rabbi Shlomo lectured, the rest of his calendar ceased to exist as far as he was concerned. Similarly, for the duration of his stroll, it was as if nothing, not even his lectures, existed for him.
Look at that line. And by the way, if you notice in the Yiddish, the original Yiddish from that talk in 1970, the way the Rebbe describes it, there's more Yiddish than English. Usually it's the other way around, right? Usually the English has more words, so it's a little bit paraphrased. But when the Rashba lectured, nothing else existed. Totally locked in on what he was doing. And when he strolled, when he took a walk, nothing else existed. You know, sometimes we can't do this thing because I have so many other things to do. One second. You can't do this now because of something else that you'll need to do soon. Ma kesher. What's the connection between one and the other? If in 15 minutes you have to catch a train, you know what that means? You have 15 minutes to do something else. If you can't do anything else, you know what that means? That means that the train has swallowed up another portion in time that it doesn't need to. What the previous Rebbe was telling his son-in-law in the 1920s in Russia was that, and he used this language, Hatzlacha in Zman, successful time management doesn't mean that you're going to add more time to the day. Successful time management means that whatever you're doing in that moment, you're doing 100%, and you're not allowing yourself to get slowed down or derailed by something else that you'll need to do at another time. You know, sometimes it feels like you're juggling so many things that you can't do anything. You ever have that experience? It's kind of like if you open up, well, back in the day, maybe when computers were a little bit, a little bit slower, a little bit less powerful. If you opened up too many tabs in your browser, remember that? Your whole browser would crash because it can't handle all those open tabs. It's kind of like that in life. You have so many open tabs. I got to do this. You wake up in the morning. It's like, okay, I have like 30 things, important things that need to get done. Forget it. Done. Not gonna do anything. Right? That's the danger of what I would call toxic multitasking. Toxic multitasking is when we multitask to the point that we end up becoming inefficient as opposed to becoming more efficient. So what the previous Rebbe was telling his son-in-law by quoting the story from the Rashba is like this. If you have a lecture, prepare for it and give it. But if you're in between stuff and you have 5 minutes, why can't you take a walk? Why can't you take a stroll? Because you have all this other stuff? Okay, great. You have 5 minutes? Great. Invest in those 5 minutes and nothing else exists. I can't because you can if you're able to silo. The truth is that what I would call, based on the story, Chabad multitasking, and it's not exclusive, but the way what the Chabad Rebbe taught, right, the Rebbe's taught, is that multitasking doesn't mean you're doing multiple things at the same time. It means that you're able to do one thing completely, close that tab, and do the next thing completely, and move from one thing to the next effectively, efficiently, and with peace of mind, because you're not trying to keep your head in two spaces at the same time. That is the ultimate way of dealing with multiple responsibilities and obligations. So that's the way the Rashba, the ancient sage, the Rashba, lived his life. That's how the previous Rebbe told the Rebbe that he was able to work on whatever he was working on 15 minutes before the train was about to leave to Moscow. And the Rebbe turns to the crowd in 1970, right? This is the first story. And he turns to the crowd of Israelis and he says the following. He says, look, this is the way, this is the successful way to manage time. That if you have even a few minutes before your flight back to Israel, you can be fully present. If you're not fully present, you're not honoring the moment. He wasn't chastising. He was just saying, this is it. And then he took it a step further. And I got to share this with you. I was debating whether to share it, but let's just go for it. And this is a concept that I think for some of you will be very familiar, but maybe it's not familiar to everybody. So I'll give a quick, a brief background. The mystics, the Jewish mystics, the Kabbalists teach that creation is not a once upon a time thing that happened. It's not that God created the world back when, and that he pressed play and then it's going. But rather, there's something called constant creation. Hitavut timidit, constant creation. What that means is that at every moment, God is recreating the universe. Now, it's a little bit elaborate to explain why we say this and what the proof of this is. But let's put it this way. I'll give you a very quick background of this. There's something called yesh meyesh versus yesh me'ayin. I'll explain these terms. Yesh meyesh means creating something from something. So, for example, one second. For example, if I take this napkin and turn it into a paper football. Remember those? First of all, it's a very inefficient paper football. Second of all, this is the extent of my creativity, is that the best thing I could do with a napkin is turn it into a triangle and call it a paper football. However, here's the point, right? Paper football, I can put it down, which I have. You have to take my word for it. And I can walk away and it'll remain, well, it's unfolding, but whatever. If I taped it down, it will remain a paper football. I don't need to be involved in it. However, there are certain things that you have to constantly be involved with, or else it won't exist. For example, if you take a football and you throw it into the air, so it will only fly as long as there's an energy propelling it in the air. The moment that energy dissipates, the football, right, starts falling to the ground, and it will remain as inert as before. And the reason is because the football never became a flying football. It was never transformed into a flying football. It would be amazing if you could sell on eBay a flying football. Imagine that. eBay, most footballs cost $20. A flying football, $2,000. How do I know it's flying? I saw it in the air. And the person buys it and activates the eBay money back guarantee. Because, like, what are you talking about? It's not a flying football. Right? When you take something and modify it into something else, yesh miyesh, something from something, you can walk away. But if you're trying to create something or force something against its very nature, then you're going to have to keep on applying that force, or else it's going to revert back to its nature. So the mystics tell us that the creation of the world is something from nothing. It's not like a previous iteration of the world existed, and then it's not like God took clay and fashioned it into a round globe. No, God created the world from nothing. You know what that means? That means you need a constant force, a constant creative force to create the impossible every moment. It's almost like you walk into a movie theater, classic mystical example. Well, little do they know about movies, but right, you walk into a movie theater and you see the film on the screen and it looks amazing. Great. Maybe even 3D or whatever it is, 360 degrees. Turn around. There's a projector right behind you, shining the light. You unplug the projector, the images cease to dance on the screen. The whole thing is over. The whole show is over. You want to get even more elaborate? You have one of those 3D shows, those whatever it is, the shows that look realistic. Tupac, right? He had one years ago. They have other ones with Elvis and Michael Jackson. So imagine you unplug that.
Oh,
and the
hologram.
That's what I was. Thank you. Hologram. A hologram, and before you know, you unplug the light, you unplug the projector, whatever, the lasers, and the show's over. Why? Because it never existed. It only existed as long as the light keeps on. The light has to be projected at every moment to keep it going. You can't say, "Well, I plugged it in, it started shining, I unplugged it, I don't need it anymore." You unplug it, it's over. So the same thing is true with the world. The world is constantly created. So the Rebbe says as follows: imagine the airplane that's taking you to Israel. He said this, 1970. So the airplane taking you to Israel doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. It does not exist. You tell me, no, it's at the gate. Nope. The airplane that exists now, in a moment, is going to be uncreated, and a new one is going to be recreated. Are you with me? Yeah. Every moment is recreated, which means your airplane doesn't even exist. What are you worried about? What are you all worried about? Your airplane doesn't even exist. And the Rebbe said, obviously, this is a very difficult mindset. And he smiled and he laughed and he said, look, I understand this is philosophically engaging, but practically it's difficult. So if you got to go, you can leave. That's what no, he didn't say it like that. That sounded like he was kicking people out. But he said, I totally understand if people have to go. And he wrapped up the Farbrengen and people left. But the point is, this is the way that we look at time management. We have to honor the moment and honor the present. The future, the next obligation, it's coming up in 15 minutes. Right now, it doesn't exist. Let me focus in on what does exist. And that is the present moment in front of me. Does this make sense? Yes? Let's take a look at some more texts. All right, let's take a look at some more texts. Here we go. Yeah. Amy, can I ask you to read? Please. Text 5. Okay, let me give the background for this one. The Radbaz, Rabbi David ben Zimra, or Ibn Zimra. So the Radbaz says the following. He was asked the following question. There was a Jew who was thrown in prison and was told that he would have the opportunity for a one-day furlough. And he was told that he could choose whatever day he wants. So this fellow asked the rabbi, or he asked a few rabbis, which day should I choose? So here we go. Look at the Radbaz's answer. Amy, if you don't mind reading this one.
Sure. I noticed that one of the sages of our day delved into the subject, but came up empty because he built his arguments on a faulty foundation. First, he suggested Yom Kippur. Then he switched to Purim. His ruling is inappropriate. Do not rely on it. His ruling must rest on this foundation. We have an undisputed halachic principle that a mitzvah must never be postponed. Accordingly, the very first mitzvah opportunity that arises that cannot be performed in prison takes precedence. It doesn't matter whether it is a major or minor mitzvah. This is quite obvious to me.
Thank you. The Radbaz gives such a beautiful answer. You're told that you can leave prison for a day and to do whatever you want. And in this case, Jewishly, Yom Kippur, Purim, Passover for the Seder, Hanukkah. No, the first opportunity you have. Now, it's not just because you don't know if the guy is going to rescind it. That's not his argument. His argument is because what is the most important time that exists? The answer is very simply, the most important time that exists is right now. Because the past, as I mentioned before, the past doesn't exist anymore. The future hasn't been created yet, based on this doctrine that I mentioned before. So the only real moment is the moment right in front of us right now. And so which moment, which mitzvah opportunity, which one should I take? The one literally in front of us. That is the idea. There is, and so this speaks to a powerful truth. The powerful truth is that when it comes to time, the most important moment is the moment that we have. The same thing we'll see is true also in soul or spirit and in space. There are three dimensions that are intertwined: time, space, and spirit. Zman, makom, and nefesh. Zman is time, makom is space, and nefesh is soul or spirit. The three are interconnected. What's true with one is true with the other as well. So when it comes to time, this time is precious. The next moment when it comes will also be precious. The next obligation when it comes will also be precious and will require my full engagement. But right now, this is my moment. This is my opportunity. I have to emphasize this point because I don't want this to get lost in the discussion. We're not saying don't plan for the future. That's not what we're saying. The Jewish teaching here is not to say be reckless. Don't pack for your flight because your flight's not here yet. The airplane doesn't exist. No. You have to plan for the future. But what that means is when you're planning, the planning itself you're engaged with fully, right? You're not distracted. If you're packing for your flight, pack and be fully engaged in that experience. Whatever is the task at hand, whether the task at hand is for the task itself or for that moment itself or for the next moment, whatever that is, engage in it fully. But to not engage in this moment because I'm so distracted, because I have something to do in the next moment, then you're just wasting time. And that's the one commodity that we never get back. There's a beautiful Jewish phrase, Adam doeg al damav, ve'eno doeg al damav, al yamav, sorry. A person, people, are worried about their money, but they're not worried about their days, their time. Yamav einam chozrim, v'damav einam ozrim. It says time, our days, we never get back, and the money doesn't help. In other words, time is the most precious commodity. Money, you can find more money, but time, you can't get back time. So if we lose time because we don't value the moment, because of either we just don't value the moment because we don't value, we think we have so many moments, this one doesn't matter, or because we're distracted by some other thing that is vying for our attention, but it's not here anyway. So in either of those instances, the moment has been compromised. There's a beautiful teaching, text number 6. Sandrine, if you don't mind reading this one, I'm going to pull it up on the screen. Text number 6. There's in a few weeks we're going to have the Torah portion of Maseh, and the Torah portion of Maseh details the 42 journeys that the Jewish people took from the land of Egypt to the doorstep of Israel. 42 journeys. By the way, let me pause this for a second. Remember Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Remember that thing? It was the answer to life was 42. That was like the answer to life. I don't know if they got that number from here, but the Torah talks about 42 journeys. Ask you a simple question. Klutz kasha. Do we have to know all 42 stops? Just say that we left Egypt and we eventually got to Israel. We have to know each and every stop along the way? That seems excessive. Reminds me of like my kids sometimes. So like they're like a few of them vie for the front seat. And it can get, a little competitive sometimes. It's like, who gets the front seat? So we have a rotation. It goes by the day, or maybe even within the day, it can go by like the journey. So like on the way there versus on the way back. But here's where it gets complicated. What if on the way there, we stop off at a gas station? Aha. Does that divide the way there into 2 stops and then you switch? Or is it on the way there? It's just until we get there, it's one journey, even if we stopped along the way. So it depends on who's asking, who wants it, and who's vying for it. The kids will have different opinions. But my policy is usually, look, until we're there, we can stop even in 2 different places. It's all one way, and the other guy gets the way back, and that's it. All right, those are my rules. In which case, I would argue that why does the Torah tell us about all 42 stops? I have to know you went to Target and the gas station and then for Slurpees. Like, I need to know all of that. What do we need to know all those details? Just tell me. They left Egypt. 40 years later, they got to Israel. Shkoyach, Mazel Tov. Wonderful. Pop the champagne. Pull out the streamers and the confetti, the blue-white confetti. Make it happen. Why do we need to know the 42 journeys? The Ragachover Gaon, we've talked about him before. He's the guy that couldn't cut his hair because it would hurt him, right? His mind, he was so brilliant. The Ragachover has this beautiful insight. Sandrine, I didn't forget. Sandrine, if you don't mind, please take this one away.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
And Moses wrote the starting point of our journey according to God's instruction. The conventional purpose of a journey is either to leave our current station or to arrive at our future destination. In this case, the journey itself was purposeful in fulfillment of a divine commandment. Similarly, the place they stop at on the way were also in fulfillment of a divine commandment. Every detail of the journey, even if it appeared necessary for the next step, was mapped out and instructed by God for a divine purpose.
Thank you. Unbelievable depth in this teaching. Right? He says, conventionally speaking, the purpose of a journey is either to leave the current station, that means the where you started off, like Egypt, or to arrive. So it should say they left Egypt, arrived at Israel. But in this case, he says the journey itself is purposeful. And every place they stopped was purposeful. Even if it appeared only that it's a stop along the way to the next step. So yes, we were driving to, my example, right? We're driving to the zoo. We stopped off at the gas station. That's not a new journey. We stopped in order to have fuel to go. No, not in Torah. Not in God's, I have to rethink now my parenting strategy. Not in God's world. If you stopped, it's a new journey, baby. It's a new reality. That itself constitutes a journey. Never overlook the journey in front of you for the journey that follows. That's also amazing. If you can pay attention to the little things, you can pay attention to the big things. What does it say? If you can only pay attention to the big things, you know what's going to happen? You'll stop paying attention to those big things, right? The big idea here is to pay attention to everything. And I know what you're thinking. I know what everyone is thinking, whether you thought about it already or you're about to think about it once I say it. This is all beautiful. But what does it have to do with a talking lottery? You got to be kidding me. This whole diversion, 1970, 1920s, the 1200s, right? Journeys and Slurpees and gas stations and zoos. What are we talking about here? Why the talking lottery? What's going on? I already told you the answer. And the answer is the same truth that exists in time exists in space. And the same truth that exists in time and space exists within soul. So let's talk about soul for a second. Not space yet, but soul. Let's talk about soul. You know what the meaning for us on a soul level is? It means not only must we honor every moment of time, but in every moment of time, we should be fully engaged with every fiber of our soul. Not to leave anything behind. I'd say, well, this moment only requires my hands. I can check out mentally, right? Or this moment only requires my eyes. I don't need to do anything about it. Whatever we're occupied with, whatever we're engaged with, it should be like every moment of time fully in. Whatever we're doing, we should be fully locked in. They're on all three dimensions of human activity, and those are thought, speech, and action, the three garments of the soul, to quote the Kabbalists, to quote the mystics. There are three garments of the soul, three ways, three modalities in which the soul expresses herself. In thought, in our thoughts, act of thought, in our speech, in the words that we say, and the actions that we do, thought, speech, and action. And the mystics suggest that if we follow the logic, not only are we to value every moment by being present, but what does it mean to be present? It means being fully present, not leaving, not holding back anything. Being fully present means that we're engaged with thought, speech, and action. And so here we have a beautiful example. Beautiful example. This is text. I'm going to read this because we're getting close with time. Text number 7. Take a look at text number 7. Okay. The Rebbe uses an example of a military campaign. He says a conquering army is only successful if it invests all its forces and all the elements of its military. Let's explain what that means. In general, we function through three garments: thought, speech, and action. If we don't utilize all three, we are not fully successful. And he breaks it down. If the army conquers without a well thought out plan, or without verbalizing instructions to its officers and prisoners, it will not conquer. It will not conquer fully. The same applies if it has a plan and acts upon it, but fails to communicate it properly, etc. It might conquer, but not completely. The vanquished will continue to resist with at least some of their faculties. And I feel like that's a little bit of a literal translation, or maybe not even that. But let me just explain the analogy. Just imagine if it could be whether it's a military campaign or a business plan that your company, right? You're the CEO and you're trying to do something. You need to have a plan in your head, thought. You need to communicate it with your team, speech, and then you need to implement it in action. If any of those three are missing, you ain't going to get the job done. If you have a good plan and you've communicated it well, but you don't execute, didn't get done. If you talked about it and executed it, but you didn't think it through, it's also going to fail. And if you thought it through and then you did it, but you never spoke about it, you didn't communicate it properly, it's also going to fail. In order for something to be successful, you have to have effective planning, communication, and implementation. Make sense? This is true in every area. It's true in marriage or a family life also, right? What are your ideals? Did you communicate properly, and are you getting it done? It's true on every level: relationships, business, war, whatever. Which just goes to tell us and remind us that to be fully invested in an effective way requires thought, speech, and action. So now we get to the talking lottery. Yes, it was a journey, but don't worry. I hope you enjoyed every moment of the journey, because that too is special, right? It's not just for the answer. It's not just the destination. It's the journey. So here's the talking lottery. So the commentaries explain, and this is coming, it's a beautiful insight, that when it comes to the lottery, it wasn't just that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, drew the lots, and the lots declared, well, that's demonstrated in action who the match was. Zavulun in Akko, or whatever it was, right? It's not just that the lottery acted, but the lottery also spoke. And as the commentators point out, as Rebbe points out, it's not just spoke, but if you speak, then you had to have thought about it. So the miracle was that the lottery thought, and then you can't speak without processing it somewhere else. So it's got to process some on a cognitive level, and then speech, and then action, not necessarily in that order, but the lots were drawn, and then it spoke to indicate that when you're involved in an activity, you need to be fully present, not only in the moment, but on all three dimensions of soul: thought, speech, and action. It's not enough to do it, but it's important to also talk about it. I was thinking, earlier today, imagine you're having a conversation with a person, right? But you're doing something else, right? Imagine you're speaking with someone face to face, they're right in front of you, and you have your phone out and you're texting or browsing. It's not nice, right? It's a little rude. Sometimes you have to look up, so whatever it is, but sometimes you have to be rude, but it's not nice. It means that your speech, your communication, and your action, your hands, are misaligned. You're not fully invested. Or imagine you're doing something with someone else, but you're speaking somewhere else. You're speaking to someone else. Again, your words are there, your actions are here. You're malaligned. You're not aligned. True alignment, and therefore true investment, is when your thought, speech, and action, when everything is lined straight, like a spine. Everything is lined up. Boom, 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 right there. Same thing is true with the talking lottery. The lottery didn't just demonstrate the winners of the land or the match. It spoke. And if it spoke, it also, on some level, whatever that means, thought, as the commentators point out.
All right.
So, yes.
Can I add something?
Sure.
Looking at my Rashi, it didn't just speak once. It spoke twice. Because the first time was in verse 54. And it says that when Eleazar the Kohen would be wearing his Urim Tumim, it would say by the Holy Spirit, if such and such tribe comes up, such and such a demarcated area should come with him. It says, and take 2 tickets. I'm skipping over, but it says the lottery, and the lot itself would shout and say, I, the lot, came up for such and such a boundary. But that's verse 54. And then in verse 56, it repeats it. It repeats it. And then it says, according to the lot would speak. That's verse 56. So it says it talked or communicated twice. Yeah. Now, I don't know where it says 3 times for all 3 garments, but there's 2 of them.
There you go. There you go. The point is that it's not enough to be invested in action, but also in communication and also in thought. To be fully present means that all 3 garments are being activated in this space, in this moment. But now you might be wondering, but why in this? Why does the Torah illustrate with this miracle in this instance of a lottery that's not just showing up with the right answer, but also talking about the right answer? Why in this context? And so we'll conclude with this point. The lottery, as we'll recall, the lottery was for a very specific purpose, and that was to divide the land of Israel. The home, right? The home of the Jewish people. The base from which Judaism would shine its light out to the world. And so really this lottery represents the mission of Torah and mitzvot, the mission of making the world a better place. What better context to reference the idea that we need to be locked in fully, thought, speech, and action, than in the context of creating a space, creating a home for God. So in the context, as the Jewish people are getting ready to enter to the land of Israel, and as they are figuring out how to divide responsibility, divide up the land, the lottery teaches us that it's not enough to do what needs to be done, but it's important also to communicate and to think and to plan, because being fully present is how we fully engage with and how we fully transform the moments that we're in. So what's true of time, i.e., that every moment has its purpose, is true of spirit, to be fully engaged in that moment. And it's also true in space. And we'll conclude with this. There's a story. I'm going to read the story very quickly. It's a beautiful story that happened a few hundred years ago. Here we go. In 1857. In 1857, one of the great Hasidim asked my honorable saintly grandfather and teacher, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, known as the Tzemach Tzedek, whose soul resides on high, may his memory protect us, about traveling to the land of Israel. So you had a disciple asking his spiritual teacher, should I move to Israel? Should I go to Israel? He opened his heart to the Rebbe and revealed that he had yearned desperately to study and pray with diligence in the Holy Land. The Rebbe replied, we must turn this land into Israel. Mach da Eretz Yisrael. He said in Yiddish, make here into Eretz Yisrael. Make this place Israel. Whether or not he was telling him to make Aliyah, it's not about whether he would go into Israel or not. But sometimes we think that it's in that place or in that time that I'll shine, or in that time and in that place that my activities will have purpose and meaning. When I go to Israel, then I can daven, then I can study Torah, then I can do what my life's mission is. But what about now? Wherever you are, you're not there. Person says, when I retire, I'll be able to, to make a difference in the world. One second. Mafdar Israel. Make Israel right here, right now. Don't wait for the next moment. Don't only grant honor and nobility and spirituality and purpose. Don't relegate that to the future. Don't put that in some time and space that's not here and not now. Whatever difference you want to make, whatever investment, spiritual investment you want to create, whatever light you want to shine, do that right now. Don't wait for the next moment. Don't wait for the next space. Do it right now. That was Tzemach Tzedek's message in 1857, and I think it's such a beautiful message. I mean, how often do we tell ourselves, when X, Y, and Z happens, then I'll do that. Like, that mitzvah, I've been thinking about that mitzvah, but you know what? Let me wait till the kids are out of the house. Then we'll do that, or whatever it is. But somewhere down the line, we'll do that. The message here is, don't wait for then. Don't wait for that place. Machda Eretz Yisrael, make Israel here, because this space, right? That was Russia, but this space deserves to be treated with the same reverence. This space deserves the same honor. This moment deserves the same honor, and my soul deserves to be fully opened up for the purpose that is in front of me. And so, my friends, as we conclude tonight's class, there's one unifying message, and that is, don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait for Israel. Right? You know what I mean, right? Don't wait till don't wait for anything else. If you got something great to do it now. Do it here and be fully present, because every moment and every space and every soul is precious. Thank you for joining me tonight for Torah studies. Hope you enjoyed it. And that's the lesson. Questions or comments? Guys, you can feel free to unmute, and we can schmooze.
Well, that's carpe diem.
Oh, there you go. Carpe diem.
But my question is, what does God, Hashem, creating the world continuously do to carbon dating?
I mean, I have no problem with that, because if they like each other, they should go out.
No, carbon dating.
Love is love. Carbon dating. I hear you. Carbon dating.
Maybe this is why Einstein couldn't figure it out.
Listen.
The missing link.
One of the okay. So you're talking about now science and faith. One of the angles, and I'm sure you've heard this angle. I'm sure we've talked about it before. One of the angles, you know, if science says the world is X number of billions of years and the Jewish year is 5,784, there's a little gap there, like a little bit of a gap there between billions of years or whatever, millions of years, billions of years, and 5,784. So one of the classic angles on this is to say that when God created the world, he didn't create an embryonic world. Adam and Eve weren't created as babies. The sin with the tree of knowledge of good and evil happened in the first few hours of their being. They were created as adults. So imagine 1 hour into their life, if you were to freeze the frame, if you were to stop time for a second and grab Adam's body and put him in a, medical examiner office, you would say, this guy's 40 years old. He's an adult. He's 40. Where did those 40 years happen? He was created already with a history. In other words, your question is the answer. Your question is about carbon dating and God creating if God creates the universe at this moment, every moment from new, what that means is when he creates this slice, it also has a history behind it, which means the first moment of creation, it could have had a very long history. Does that make sense? Which means there's nothing to preclude the fact that God created a world with millions of years of history and fossils. Imagine if Adam and Eve, if their bone structure was adult-like, and that's what we believe, right? That they were created as adults. Well, it takes years to grow. Like, okay, God can pull off. He created what we would say is an ongoing world at a starting point. At a moment in time, it starts, and it starts not from scratch. It starts as if it was. That's one explanation. I'm not saying that's the only explanation. I'm not saying I like that explanation. I'm not saying you should buy the explanation. I'm just saying that's one angle that I think ties a few of the things together.
Well, the carbon dating question was really moot. It was just something to think about.
Right. Good. Anything else? Otherwise, I'm going to give my announcements. You know my announcements. Okay, a week from, so hold on 1 second. Let's focus on this for a second. Very important. Super important announcement. Tomorrow, I'll send out an email about this. We do Torah studies in different seasons or series throughout the year. So we have 5 books of Torah, sure, but we do Torah studies in 4 series. Why? I don't know. But we break it down into 4 instead of 5. And so we are entering the last season of Torah studies for 5784. And it's starting next week. So that by the next Torah portion, we're starting a brand new book. If you would like to purchase the textbook, I'm sending out an email tomorrow with a link. You can get it on Amazon. They ship it to your door. Amazon Prime, free shipping if you have that, etc. So that is regarding that. The link, the Zoom link stays the same. The in-person time stays the same. Location stays the same. Tuesdays, 7:30 to 8:30. Okay, so that's starting next Tuesday. We have a brand new series. So that is lined up. That's point number 1. Point number 2, a week from tonight. So that means next Wednesday. It's not Tuesday. We push off the class, right? So next Wednesday night, I'm doing starting a 2-part seminar on Israel, how Israel wins. And the idea, the purpose behind the seminar is to explain, is to develop and to demonstrate a Torah true approach to the conflict that's been going on for the last 80 years, whatever. since Israel 1948, right? So the last whatever number of years, 7, 8 decades of Israel's state of Israel's existence from a Torah perspective. Why does it seem like the same conflicts are coming up again and again and again? What can we do about it? How do we prevent October 7th from happening again? How do we rally world opinion around Jewish causes and Israel and the cause of Israel, the state of Israel, the land of Israel, etc.? We're going to develop all the questions that I've been asked countless times over the last whatever month since October 7th. So all of these questions we're going to address using Torah sources, using the teachings of the Rebbe on this. The Rebbe spoke for hours about Israel, communicated with top officials and prime ministers and presidents of Israel. We're going to be developing this idea over 2 seminars starting next Wednesday, July 31st, 7:30 p.m. Don't miss it. The Torah Center ATL.org/Israel. Join us. Next, we also have a new upcoming class on the election, on election issues called Election 2024. That's a not to be missed series, as well as Journey of the Soul, looking at life, death, and the afterlife. Everything is available on the website. You can check out everything, all the details and the dates and the descriptions of the classes. Join us. Tell your friends to join because they will enjoy it too. All right. I think that's all the news that's fit to print. Oh, we also have events coming up, but stay tuned for that. We got a lot of stuff brewing. Okay. I think that's it. Those are my announcements.
Rabbi,
Thank you,
are you-
Rabbi.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Is the Israel multimedia, is that going to be on virtual as well?
Yes. Thank you for asking that. I don't know if it's been emphasized in the marketing. I have to double check that. But yes, it is live and on Zoom. We have an online option for that. It's going to be really, really special. So highly recommended for everybody to join. I mean, it's so core to what's going on. And these are the biggest questions. Like should Israel be concerned about its own best interest or about its alliance with the U.S. and how do you satisfy both? So these are like high level questions we're going to be addressing through clear Jewish sources. It's going to really be eye opening. So but it's online. That's the long answer to a very straightforward question. All right, good.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Great to see everybody. Shavua Tov. Shabbat Shalom. It's Wednesday night. We can already wish each other Shabbat Shalom. Can't usually do that on Tuesday. Good. Mark, what do you say?
Yashikoach.
Thank you. I'm glad I paused for that because all right. We'll see you. Dr. Maxey, Susan, tell Richard I said hi. Mark, Phyllis,
Thank you.
Larry, Mom, Ellen, Lisa, and David, and Jeff, and Diane, and Susan, and Faye. Great to see you all. Hope everyone rode out the storm okay. Lila Tov. See y'all.